Part 1. The Journey. West, the train wheels clicked against the tracks like a clock counting down the minutes to her new life. Mary Beth pressed her face against the dusty window and watched the endless prairie roll by. 3 days she had been traveling from Boston, and her back ached from the hard wooden seat. Her small carpet bag sat on her lap, holding everything she owned in the world. Inside that bag were her few dresses, a worn Bible, and most importantly, the letters. 7 letters from Thomas Whitmore, a rancher in Montana Territory who needed a wife. His words had been proper and kind on paper. He promised her a good home, steady meals, and respect. After years of working in the textile factory for barely enough money to rent a tiny room, his offer seemed like a blessing. Mary Beth touched the brooch at her throat, the only thing left from her mother. She wondered what Mama would think of her daughter traveling west to marry a stranger. Would she be proud or worried? The factory girls back in Boston had called her brave, but sitting on this train, Mary Beth felt more scared than brave. The conductor walked through the car, his voice booming over the noise of the engine. "Next stop, Cedar Creek Station. All passengers for Cedar Creek, gather your belongings." Mary Beth's heart jumped. This was it. She stood up, smoothing her blue traveling dress and checking that her hair was still neat under her bonnet. The other passengers barely looked at her as she made her way to the door. They were used to seeing young women heading west to start new lives. The train began to slow, and Mary Beth could see a small wooden platform ahead. Her stomach twisted with nerves. What if Thomas didn't like her? What if she disappointed him? The letters had made everything seem so certain, but now doubt crept into her mind like cold air through a crack in the window. The train stopped with a sharp whistle and a cloud of steam. Mary Beth stepped down onto the platform, her legs shaky after days of sitting. She looked around for Thomas. He had written that he was tall with dark hair and would wear his best hat to meet her. But the platform was nearly empty. An old man with a white beard sat on a bench whittling a piece of wood. A woman in a faded dress hurried past with a basket of eggs. No tall, dark-haired man in a good hat. Mary Beth felt panic rising in her chest. "Excuse me," she called to the old man. "Is this Cedar Falls Station?" The man looked up from his whittling and squinted at her. "No, miss. This here's Cedar Creek Station. Cedar Falls is about 50 miles north of here." Mary Beth's heart sank like a stone thrown in a well, but the conductor said Cedar Creek. "That's right. That's where we are. Cedar Creek." The old man went back to his whittling as if young women got off at the wrong train stop every day. Mary Beth stared at the departing train, black smoke disappearing into the blue sky. She was stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but her carpet bag and $3 in her purse. The platform looked out over empty grassland that stretched to the horizon. A few wooden buildings lined what might generously be called a main street. "When does the next train come?" she asked the old man, trying to keep her voice steady. "Thursday," he replied without looking up. "Thursday? But today is Monday." "Yep. Train only comes through twice a week. Mondays and Thursdays, 3 days. She had to wait 3 days in this tiny place before she could continue to Cedar Falls to meet Thomas. Mary Beth looked around desperately. There had to be somewhere to stay, somewhere safe for a young woman alone. "Is there a hotel here?" she asked. The old man actually laughed at that. "Hotel in Cedar Creek? Miss, we got maybe 30 people in this whole town. Mrs. Henderson sometimes takes in travelers, but she's visiting her sister in Billings this week." Mary Beth sat down hard on the bench, her carpet bag clutching to her chest. This was a disaster. What would she do? Where would she sleep? How would she eat? Her $3 wouldn't last long, and she had no way to contact Thomas to tell him what had happened. The sun was getting lower in the sky, and the prairie wind was picking up. Mary Beth had never felt so alone in her life. Back in Boston, even in her tiny room in the boarding house, she had been surrounded by the sounds of the city. Here the silence was so complete it made her ears ring. She opened her bag and pulled out Thomas's last letter, reading his words again for comfort. "My dear Mary Beth, I await your arrival with great anticipation. Cedar Falls Station is easy to find, and I will be there to meet your train. Your devoted future husband, Thomas Whitmore." Cedar Falls, not Cedar Creek. How could she have made such a mistake? She remembered being so nervous when she bought her ticket that her hands had been shaking. Had she said the wrong name to the ticket agent? Had he misheard her? The old man finished his whittling and stood up to leave. You might want to find somewhere to shelter for the night, miss. Gets mighty cold out here after dark, and there's talk of a storm coming in. But where? Mary Beth called after him. Where can I go? He pointed down the dusty street. Morrison's place is about 2 miles that way. Jake might put you up in his barn if you ask nice. He's got a little girl, so he understands about looking out for folks in need. A barn. Mary Beth had never slept in a barn in her life. But as the wind picked up and clouds began to gather in the distance, she realized she might not have a choice. She picked up her bag and started walking in the direction the old man had pointed. The road was really just wheel ruts in the dirt, and her city shoes weren't made for this kind of walking. Dust got into everything and her throat felt dry and scratchy. She passed a few scattered buildings, a grain store, a blacksmith shop, and what looked like a saloon with its doors swinging in the wind. As she walked, Mary Beth tried not to think about what Thomas must be doing right now. Was he waiting at Cedar Falls Station, wondering where she was? Would he think she had changed her mind and decided not to come? Would he be angry when she finally arrived 3 days late? The clouds were getting darker, and Mary Beth could smell rain in the air. She quickened her pace, her bag bouncing against her hip. 2 miles had never seemed so far. Her feet were starting to blister and her back ached from carrying the bag. Just as the first drops of rain began to fall, Mary Beth saw a house in the distance. It was small and simple, with a barn nearby and a few horses in a corral. Smoke came from the chimney, which meant someone was home. She said a quick prayer and walked faster, hoping that this Jake Morrison would be as kind as the old man had suggested. This was not how she had imagined starting her new life in Montana territory. But as thunder rumbled overhead and the rain began to fall harder, Mary Beth knew she had to make the best of whatever came next. Part 2. An unexpected welcome. The rain was falling harder now, soaking through Mary Beth's traveling dress and making her shiver. She hurried toward the small house, her wet shoes slipping on the muddy ground. Lightning flashed across the dark sky, followed by a crash of thunder that made her jump. As she got closer to the house, she could see warm light glowing through the windows. It looked welcoming after her long, cold walk. But now that she was here, Mary Beth felt nervous again. What would she say? How do you ask a stranger to let you sleep in their barn? She was still trying to find the right words when she heard a sound that made her stop in her tracks. Someone was crying. Not loud crying, but the quiet, heartbroken sobbing of a child. Mary Beth followed the sound around the side of the house and found a little girl sitting on the wooden steps of the back porch. She looked to be about 6 years old, with light brown hair that hung in tangles around her face. Her dress was too big and had holes in the knees. She was crying into her hands, her small shoulders shaking. Without thinking, Mary Beth walked over and sat down on the step beside the child. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked gently. The little girl looked up with red, swollen eyes. Her face was dirty and there were tear tracks through the dust on her cheeks. For a moment, she just stared at Mary Beth as if she couldn't believe someone was actually talking to her. Then, to Mary Beth's surprise, the child reached out and took her hand. Her small fingers were cold and rough from work that should have been too hard for someone her age. "Are you my mama?" the little girl whispered, her voice full of desperate hope. Mary Beth's heart broke a little. "Oh, honey, no. I'm just a traveler who got lost. What's your name?" "Lucy," the child said, but she didn't let go of Mary Beth's hand. "Are you sure you're not my mama? Maybe you just forgot about me." Before Mary Beth could answer, the back door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands. His brown hair was messy, and he looked tired in the way that comes from working too hard for too long. When he saw Mary Beth sitting with the little girl, he stopped short. "Lucy, what are you doing out here in the rain?" he asked, then noticed Mary Beth. "Oh, I'm sorry, miss. I didn't know we had company." Mary Beth stood up, still holding Lucy's hand because the child refused to let go. "I'm Mary Beth Ashford. I got off at the wrong train stop and need somewhere to stay until Thursday. The man at the station said you might let me sleep in your barn." The man took off his hat and ran his fingers through his hair. "I'm Jake Morrison, and this is my daughter Lucy." He looked down at the little girl who was still gripping Mary Beth's hand like a lifeline. "Lucy, you can't just ask every lady if she's your mama, but maybe this one really is," Lucy said stubbornly. "She has kind eyes like a mama should have." Jake's face softened when he looked at his daughter, and Mary Beth could see the love there mixed with worry and exhaustion. "I'm sorry about this, Miss Ashford. Lucy's mother died when she was born, and sometimes she gets ideas about women who come through town. It's all right, Mary Beth said, and meant it. There was something about this sad little girl that tugged at her heart. I understand wanting a mother. Jake studied Mary Beth for a moment, taking in her wet dress and the carpet bag she clutched in her free hand. You can't sleep in the barn, especially with this storm coming in. The roof leaks and it's not safe for a lady alone. You can have my bed tonight. I'll sleep by the fire. Oh, I couldn't take your bed, Mary Beth protested. The barn will be fine. No, ma'am, Jake said firmly. My mama raised me to be a gentleman, and no woman is sleeping in my barn while I have a roof over my head. Besides, he added with a tired smile, Lucy seems to have adopted you already. As if to prove his point, Lucy tugged on Mary Beth's hand. Will you come inside? I can show you my room. Well, it's not really a room. I sleep in the kitchen by the stove because it's warmer. Mary Beth felt another little crack in her heart. This child was sleeping on the kitchen floor? I'd love to see where you sleep, Lucy. Jake held the door open for them, and Mary Beth stepped into the small house with Lucy still attached to her hand. The inside was clean but sparse. There wasn't much furniture, just the basics needed to survive. The kitchen had a table, 2 chairs, and a big black stove that provided most of the heat for the house. Sure enough, there was a pile of old blankets and a flat pillow on the floor near the stove. It looked uncomfortable and lonely. This is where I sleep, Lucy said proudly. It's warm, and I can see the stars through the window if I stay awake long enough. Mary Beth knelt down to examine the makeshift bed. The blankets were clean but thin, and the pillow was barely thicker than a dish rag. How did this child sleep on the hard floor night after night? Lucy, why don't you help Miss Ashford get settled while I see to her things? Jake suggested. He picked up Mary Beth's wet carpet bag. I'll hang this by the fire to dry out. Can I help you with your hair? Lucy asked eagerly. It got all wet in the rain. I know how to braid really good. I learned by watching the ladies in town. Mary Beth touched her tangled wet hair and realized she must look a mess. That would be very helpful, Lucy, thank you. Lucy beamed and ran to get a comb from somewhere in the house. When she came back, she carefully began working the tangles out of Mary Beth's long hair. Her small hands were gentle and patient, much more skilled than Mary Beth would have expected from such a young child. You have pretty hair, Lucy said as she worked. It's like the color of honey. My mama had yellow hair too. At least that's what Papa tells me. I don't remember her, but Papa says she was beautiful. I'm sure she was, Mary Beth said softly. And I'm sure she loved you very much. Do you think she watches me from heaven? Lucy asked, starting to braid Mary Beth's hair. Papa says she does, but sometimes I wonder if she forgot about me. Oh, sweetheart, mothers never forget their children. Not even in heaven. I bet she watches you every day and feels proud of what a good, helpful girl you are. Lucy worked in silence for a few minutes, concentrating on the braid. Then she said quietly, I dream about having a mama sometimes. In my dreams, she makes me breakfast and tells me stories and hugs me when I'm scared during storms like tonight. Mary Beth felt tears prick her eyes. This poor child was raising herself while her father worked to keep them alive. It wasn't Jake's fault. Mary Beth could see that he was doing his best. But Lucy was missing something every child needed. There, Lucy said, finishing the braid. Now you look pretty again. Do you want to see the rest of the house? It's not very big. Mary Beth let Lucy lead her on a tour of the 3 small rooms. Jake's bedroom was just big enough for a bed and a washstand. There was a tiny sitting room with 2 chairs and a shelf of books. Everything was clean and tidy, but there was no warmth, no personal touches that made a house feel like a home. Papa works really hard, Lucy explained as they walked. He's always fixing fences or taking care of the cattle or working in the fields. Sometimes he's so tired at dinner that he falls asleep at the table. What about you? Mary Beth asked. What do you do all day? I take care of the chickens and collect the eggs. I can cook a little bit, beans and bread mostly. And I try to keep the house clean. Papa says I'm his best helper, 6 years old and already carrying the weight of running a household. Mary Beth had worked in the factory since she was 14, but at least she had been 14. Lucy was still a baby, really. Jake came back into the kitchen and Mary Beth could see the worry in his eyes as he watched his daughter. He loved Lucy deeply, that much was clear, but he was overwhelmed and exhausted, trying to be both father and mother while keeping a struggling ranch going. Miss Ashford, I hope Lucy hasn't been talking your ear off. he said with a gentle smile. She doesn't get much company, so she's excited to have someone new to talk to. She's been wonderful, Mary Beth said honestly. And she did a beautiful job with my hair. Lucy glowed at the praise, and Mary Beth realized how hungry this child was for attention and affection. For the first time since getting off the train at the wrong stop, Mary Beth felt like maybe this mistake had happened for a reason. The storm was getting worse outside, with thunder shaking the small house and rain pounding on the roof. But inside, by the warm stove, Mary Beth felt something she hadn't expected to find in this remote place. She felt needed. Part 3. Shelter in the storm. The storm hit with full force just as Jake was showing Mary Beth where she would sleep. Wind howled around the small house, rattling the windows and making the walls creak. Lightning lit up the prairie like daylight, followed by thunder so loud it seemed to shake the very ground. "This is a big one," Jake said, checking the windows to make sure they were secure. "Sometimes these prairie storms can go on all night." Lucy pressed close to Mary Beth's side, her small body trembling with each crash of thunder. "I don't like storms," she whispered. "They're scary." Mary Beth put her arm around the little girl. "I know they seem frightening, but we're safe inside. The storm will pass. Will you stay with me?" Lucy asked, looking up at Mary Beth with pleading eyes. "Papa usually has to go check on the animals when it storms. I don't like being alone when it's loud like this." Jake overheard and looked apologetic. "I do need to make sure the horses are all right in the barn. The roof has some weak spots, and if it's leaking, I need to move them to drier stalls. But I hate leaving Lucy alone when she's scared." "I'll stay with her," Mary Beth said without thinking. "You go take care of what you need to do." Relief washed over Jake's face. "Thank you. I won't be long." He pulled on his heavy coat and hat. "Lucy, you be good for Miss Ashford." "I will." "Papa," Lucy promised, though she held tighter to Mary Beth's hand. After Jake left, Mary Beth looked around the kitchen and realized she hadn't eaten since morning. Her stomach was growling, and she wondered if Lucy was hungry too. "Have you had supper yet?" she asked. Lucy shook her head. "Papa said we'd eat when he finished fixing the fence, but then you came and it started storming." Mary Beth stood up, bringing Lucy with her since the child seemed determined not to let go of her hand. "Well then, let's see what we can make. I may not know much about ranching, but I can cook a decent meal." She looked through the kitchen and found the supplies she expected: beans, flour, some bacon, and a few withered potatoes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make a hearty stew that would warm them all on this cold, wet night. "Can you help me?" Mary Beth asked Lucy. "I could use an assistant cook." Lucy's face lit up. "Really? Papa usually just tells me to stay out of the way when he's cooking." "Well, I think cooking is more fun when you have help. Can you wash these potatoes for me?" Lucy nodded eagerly and climbed up on a chair to reach the wash basin. She scrubbed each potato carefully, proud to have such an important job. Mary Beth smiled, remembering how good it felt to be useful when she was young and alone in the world. As they worked together, Mary Beth learned more about Lucy's life. The little girl chattered away, happy to have someone listen to her. "I take care of the chickens all by myself," Lucy said proudly. "We have 6 hens and 1 rooster named Buster. Buster doesn't like me very much, but the hens are nice. They let me pet them sometimes." "That's wonderful," Mary Beth said, cutting up the bacon. "Taking care of animals is a big responsibility. Papa says I'm getting really good at it. He says maybe when I'm bigger I can help with the cattle too." "Do you know about cattle?" "No, I'm from the city. I've never lived on a ranch before." "Where did you live?" Lucy asked, genuinely curious. "In Boston, in a big city with lots of buildings and people everywhere." "I worked in a factory making cloth." Lucy wrinkled her nose. "That sounds loud and crowded. I like it better here where it's quiet and you can see the sky." Mary Beth had never thought of it that way. She had always seen the city as exciting and full of opportunities, while the countryside seemed empty and lonely. But looking at it through Lucy's eyes, she began to see the beauty in the wide open spaces and endless sky. The stew was starting to smell good when Jake came back, dripping wet and shivering from the cold. "Smells like heaven in here," he said, hanging his coat by the door. "Lucy, I see you've been helping." "Miss Mary Beth let me be her assistant cook," Lucy announced proudly. "I washed all the potatoes and stirred the pot. Did you now?" Jake smiled at his daughter, and Mary Beth could see how much these small moments of childhood joy meant to him. "Well, you did a fine job. That stew smells better than anything I've ever made." They sat around the small table to eat, with Lucy chattering happily about her cooking adventure. It was simple food, but it tasted wonderful after the long, difficult day. Mary Beth watched Jake eat with the focus of a man who was used to going hungry, and she made sure to give him extra portions. "This is the best meal we've had in months," Jake said gratefully. "I'm not much of a cook, I'm afraid. We eat a lot of beans and hard bread around here." "Well, I enjoy cooking," Mary Beth said. "It's nice to have people to cook for." After dinner, they sat by the fire while the storm continued to rage outside. Lucy curled up next to Mary Beth, fighting to stay awake, but clearly exhausted from the excitement of the day. "Tell me a story," Lucy murmured. Her eyes already half closed, Mary Beth looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. She tried to think of an appropriate story for a little girl, something that would be comforting on a stormy night. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a little girl who lived in a cottage at the edge of a great forest. She was brave and kind, and she took care of all the forest animals when they were hurt or scared." As Mary Beth spun the tale, she watched Lucy's face relax. The little girl's breathing grew deep and even, and soon she was fast asleep against Mary Beth's shoulder. "She doesn't usually fall asleep that easily during storms," Jake said quietly. "You have a gift with children." "She's a wonderful child," Mary Beth said, smoothing Lucy's tangled hair. "You're raising her well." Jake's face clouded over. "I'm not, though. Look at her, sleeping on the kitchen floor wearing clothes that don't fit, taking care of chickens when she should be playing with dolls. She needs things I can't give her." Mary Beth studied his tired face in the firelight. "She needs love, and you give her plenty of that. The rest is just circumstances." "She needs a mother," Jake said bluntly. "She needs someone to braid her hair and teach her how to be a lady and sing her to sleep when it storms. I can't be everything she needs." There was such pain in his voice that Mary Beth's heart ached for him. She could see that he blamed himself for every hardship Lucy faced, every moment of loneliness, every night sleeping on the hard floor. "Have you thought about remarrying?" she asked gently. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what?" "Look around, Miss Ashford. I can barely keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. What woman would want to marry into this struggle? And even if there was one, where would I find her? The nearest town big enough to have unmarried women is 2 days' ride from here." He had a point. This isolated ranch was no place for a social life, and Jake was clearly too proud to advertise for a mail-order bride like Thomas Whitmore had done. He was trapped between his love for his daughter and his inability to give her what she needed. "Besides," Jake continued, "Lucy gets attached too easily. Like tonight with you. In 3 days you'll get on that train and go to your new husband, and she'll be heartbroken. I can't keep letting her hope for things that won't happen." Mary Beth looked down at the sleeping child in her arms. Lucy's face was peaceful now, free from the worry and loneliness that seemed to shadow her during waking hours. What would it do to this little girl to watch another potential mother figure disappear from her life? "Maybe I should sleep in the barn after all," Mary Beth said quietly. "I don't want to make things harder for her." "No," Jake said firmly. "It's not safe, and besides, the damage is already done. She's already decided you might be her mother. Might as well let her enjoy it for a few days." The storm was finally starting to ease, though rain still pattered against the windows. Jake stood up and gently lifted Lucy from Mary Beth's arms. "I'll put her to bed," he said. "You should get some rest, too. Tomorrow will be a long day." As Jake carried his daughter to her pile of blankets by the stove, Mary Beth felt a strange sadness wash over her. In just one evening, she had gotten a taste of what it might be like to be part of a family. Not the formal arrangement she had planned with Thomas, but something real and warm and needed. She thought about her life in Boston, the long days in the noisy factory, the lonely evenings in her tiny room, the constant worry about having enough money for rent and food. Then she looked around this simple kitchen where she had spent the evening, cooking and telling stories and feeling useful in a way she had never experienced. Before, maybe getting off at the wrong stop wasn't such a disaster after all. Maybe it was the first time in her life that she had ended up exactly where she belonged. But as Jake tucked Lucy into her makeshift bed and the little girl murmured, "Good night, Mama," in her sleep, Mary Beth remembered that she was only passing through. In 3 days, she would get on a train to Cedar Falls to marry a man she had never met. The thought should have excited her. Instead, it made her feel empty inside. Part 4. Seeds of Connection. Mary Beth woke to the sound of someone moving quietly around the kitchen. Pale morning light filtered through the windows and she could smell coffee brewing. For a moment she forgot where she was and felt confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then she remembered the wrong train stop, the storm, Jake and Lucy Morrison. She sat up in Jake's bed, feeling guilty for taking his room while he slept by the fire. Her traveling dress was wrinkled from sleeping in it, but at least it was dry now. Through the thin walls she could hear Jake talking softly to Lucy, trying not to wake their guest. When Mary Beth emerged from the bedroom, she found Jake at the stove making breakfast while Lucy sat at the table, still in her nightgown, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Good morning," Mary Beth said softly. Lucy's face immediately brightened. "You're still here. I thought maybe you were just a dream." "I'm still here," Mary Beth assured her, touched by the child's obvious relief. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison. I hope I didn't sleep too late." "Please call me Jake, and you didn't sleep late at all. The sun's barely up." He gestured toward the table. "Coffee's ready if you'd like some." Mary Beth accepted the cup gratefully. The coffee was strong and hot, exactly what she needed after the strange night. As she sipped it, she watched Jake move around the small kitchen with practiced efficiency. He had clearly been doing this alone for a long time. "What can I do to help?" she asked. "Nothing, you're our guest," Jake said, but Lucy had different ideas. "Can Miss Mary Beth help me get dressed?" the little girl asked. "I can do it myself, but it's hard to reach all the buttons." Jake looked uncertain. "Lucy, Miss Ashford is a lady. She probably has better things to do than help you dress." "Actually, I'd be happy to help," Mary Beth said, standing up. "I have plenty of time, and I'd enjoy it." Lucy beamed and took Mary Beth's hand, leading her to a corner of the kitchen where her few clothes hung on pegs. Mary Beth was shocked by how little the child owned. 2 worn dresses, 1 nightgown, and some undergarments that had been mended many times. "This is my good dress," Lucy said, pointing to a faded blue frock that was clearly too big for her. "Papa bought it from Mrs. Henderson when her daughter outgrew it." Mary Beth helped Lucy out of her nightgown and into the dress, trying not to let her dismay show on her face. The child was far too thin, and her arms and legs were covered with small bruises and scratches from her daily work around the ranch. "There," Mary Beth said, buttoning up the back. "But this dress is too long for you. You might trip. I roll up the sleeves and try to walk careful," Lucy said matter-of-factly. "Papa says when I grow some more it'll fit better." Mary Beth knelt down and looked at the hem. With some quick stitching, she could take it up several inches and make it much safer for Lucy to wear. "Would you like me to fix this for you? Make it the right length?" Lucy's eyes grew wide. "You know how to sew?" "I worked in a clothing factory for years. I'm very good with a needle and thread." "Could you really?" "Papa tried once, but he's not good at sewing. He made it all crooked." Mary Beth smiled. "I'd be honored to fix your dress. Do you have a needle and thread?" While Lucy ran to find the sewing supplies, Mary Beth thought about all the fine dresses she had helped make in the factory, elaborate gowns for wealthy ladies who probably owned dozens of outfits they hardly wore. Yet here was a little girl who owned 2 dresses, both too big, and was thrilled at the prospect of having one that fit properly. Lucy returned with a small tin box containing some basic sewing supplies. Mary Beth was pleased to see that the thread, while limited in colors, was good quality. Someone, probably Jake, had made sure to buy the best he could afford. "This might take a while," Mary Beth warned as she began measuring and pinning the hem. "Are you sure you don't mind standing still?" "I don't mind," Lucy said eagerly. "Will you tell me about the city while you work? About all the people in the big buildings?" So Mary Beth began to describe Boston as she carefully hemmed Lucy's dress. She told her about the tall brick buildings, the busy streets full of carriages and people, the harbor with its many ships. Lucy listened with fascination, asking dozens of questions. "Were you lonely in the city?" Lucy asked. "With so many people around." The question caught Mary Beth off guard. She had never really thought about it, but now that Lucy asked, she realized the answer was yes. Surrounded by thousands of people, she had been desperately lonely. "Sometimes," she admitted, "having lots of people around doesn't always mean you have friends or family." "That's sad," Lucy said seriously. "I get lonely sometimes too, but at least I have Papa. And the animals. And now I have you. Even if it's just for a little while." Mary Beth's throat tightened with emotion. This child accepted so little and was grateful for so much. In the city, Mary Beth had known people who complained constantly about their lives, even though they had far more than Jake and Lucy ever dreamed of. "There," she said, finishing the last stitches. "Try walking around now." Lucy took a few steps, her face lighting up with joy. The dress now fell to just below her knees instead of dragging on the floor. She could move freely without tripping over the fabric. "It's perfect," she exclaimed. "Look, Papa. Miss Mary Beth fixed my dress." Jake looked up from the breakfast he was preparing and smiled. "Well, look at that. You look like a proper young lady now, Lucy." "I feel like one too," Lucy said, twirling around so the skirt flared out. "Thank you, Miss Mary Beth. This is the most beautiful dress in the whole world." Mary Beth had to blink back tears. She had sewn elaborate ball gowns worth hundreds of dollars, but none of them had ever brought anyone as much joy as this simple alteration. "Now," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "let's do something about your hair." Lucy's hair hadn't been properly brushed in days, maybe weeks. It was tangled and matted in places where she had tried to brush it herself but couldn't reach. Mary Beth sat Lucy down and patiently worked through every knot, being careful not to pull too hard. "Ow," Lucy said once, then immediately added, "I'm sorry. I know you're being gentle. Papa tries to brush it sometimes, but his hands are too big and rough for hair brushing." "You don't need to apologize," Mary Beth said softly. "I know it hurts. We'll go slow." As she worked, Mary Beth found herself thinking about her own childhood. She had been orphaned at 8 and sent to live with a distant relative who treated her more like a servant than family. No one had ever taken such care with her appearance, had ever made her feel pretty or special. She understood Lucy's hunger for this kind of attention. When she finished brushing, Mary Beth braided Lucy's hair into 2 neat plaits and tied them with small pieces of ribbon from her sewing box. "There," she said, turning Lucy toward the small mirror that hung by the washstand. "What do you think?" Lucy stared at her reflection in wonder. With her dress properly fitted and her hair neatly braided, she looked like a different child. She looked cared for. "Is that really me?" she whispered, touching one of the braids. "That's really you, and you're beautiful." Lucy threw her arms around Mary Beth's waist. "Thank you," she said, her voice muffled against Mary Beth's dress. "I feel so pretty." Over Lucy's head, Mary Beth met Jake's eyes. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a plate of eggs and bacon, but he wasn't moving. He was just staring at his daughter with an expression of wonder, and something that looked almost like grief. "She looks so much like her mother," he said quietly. "Catherine had the same color hair, the same smile. She's a beautiful child," Mary Beth said, "inside and out." Jake set down the plate and knelt beside Lucy. "You do look beautiful, sweetheart. Like a little princess." "Miss Mary Beth made me beautiful," Lucy said proudly. "No," Mary Beth corrected gently. "You were already beautiful. I just helped you see it." They sat down to breakfast together, and Mary Beth marveled at how different the atmosphere was from the night before. Lucy chattered happily, excited about her improved appearance and eager to show off her new dress to the chickens. Jake seemed more relaxed too, as if seeing his daughter's happiness had lifted some of the weight from his shoulders. "After breakfast, I need to check on the cattle," Jake said. "The storm might have damaged some fencing. Lucy, you can collect the eggs and feed the chickens." "Can Miss Mary Beth come with me?" Lucy asked hopefully. "I want to show her my chickens." Mary Beth looked at Jake, who nodded. "If she doesn't mind getting her shoes muddy." "I don't mind at all," Mary Beth said. "I'd love to meet your chickens, Lucy." As they finished eating, Mary Beth realized that she hadn't thought about Thomas or Cedar Falls or her original plans in hours. For the first time in months, she felt useful and needed in a way that had nothing to do with earning money or surviving. She felt like she belonged somewhere. The feeling was so unfamiliar that it scared her almost as much as it thrilled her. In 2 more days, she would have to leave this behind and continue on to her arranged marriage. But for now, for this moment, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Part 5. The truth about Thomas. The morning was crisp and clear after the storm, with puddles reflecting the blue sky like scattered mirrors across the ranch yard. Mary Beth followed Lucy to the chicken coop, lifting her skirts to avoid the mud. The air smelled fresh and clean, so different from the smoky, crowded atmosphere of Boston. "This is Henrietta," Lucy said proudly, pointing to a plump red hen. "She's my favorite because she always lets me pet her. And that's Buster over there. He's the rooster, and he thinks he's very important." Mary Beth watched Lucy move confidently among the chickens, scattering feed and checking for eggs. The child was clearly comfortable with her responsibilities, handling them with a maturity beyond her years. "You're very good at this," Mary Beth observed. "Papa taught me when I was little. He said everyone on a ranch has to do their part, even little girls." Lucy carefully gathered the eggs in her apron. "Do you know anything about chickens?" "Not a thing," Mary Beth admitted. "In the city, we bought our eggs at the market." "Really? You never had your own chickens? How did you know where the eggs came from?" Mary Beth laughed at the innocent question. "I never really thought about it, to be honest." As they worked together, Lucy chattering about each chicken's personality, Mary Beth found herself thinking about how different this life was from everything she had known. There was something satisfying about collecting eggs that were still warm from the nest, about knowing exactly where your food came from. When they finished with the chickens, Lucy took Mary Beth on a tour of the rest of the small ranch. They visited the barn where Jake kept his 3 horses and the few head of cattle that had survived the harsh winter. Everything was modest but well-maintained, showing Jake's dedication despite his limited resources. "Papa works really hard," Lucy said as they walked. "Sometimes I hear him up at night, worrying about money and the ranch. He thinks I'm asleep, but I know he's scared sometimes." The simple honesty in Lucy's voice broke Mary Beth's heart. This child was far too aware of her father's struggles, carrying burdens that should belong to adults alone. They were heading back to the house when Jake returned from checking the fence lines. His face was grim and Mary Beth could see the worry in his eyes. "How bad is the damage?" she asked. Jake looked surprised that she would ask, then seemed to remember that she wasn't just a guest but someone who had shown genuine interest in their lives. "3 sections of fence down," he said tiredly. "It'll take me most of the day to fix them, and I need to do it before the cattle wander off. Problem is I don't have money for new posts right now." "Can't you use fallen trees from the storm?" Mary Beth suggested. "That's exactly what I was thinking," Jake said, looking at her with new respect. "You have a practical mind, Miss Ashford." Lucy tugged on Mary Beth's hand. "Can we help Papa fix the fence?" "Lucy, that's hard work, not suitable for ladies," Jake said automatically. "But I want to help," Lucy insisted. "And Miss Mary Beth is strong." "I can tell." Mary Beth looked at Jake's tired face and made a decision. "I'd be happy to help. I may not know ranching, but I can learn." Jake hesitated. "It's dirty work and you'll ruin your dress." "I have another dress," Mary Beth said practically, "and clothes can be washed." So they spent the morning working together to repair the storm damage. Mary Beth proved surprisingly capable at the physical labor, her years in the factory having given her strength and endurance. Lucy helped by gathering small tools and keeping everyone supplied with water. As they worked, Jake began to relax and talk more freely. Mary Beth learned about his struggles to keep the ranch going. The harsh winters that killed half his cattle, the falling prices that made it hard to earn enough to live on. "I keep thinking I should sell out and move to town," he said as they lifted a heavy fence post. "Find work in a store or something steady. But this land belonged to my father and Catherine loved it here. It feels like giving up on everything we dreamed about." "What would Lucy think about moving to town?" Mary Beth asked. "She says she wants to stay here, but she's just a child. She doesn't understand how hard this life is, especially for a woman. If I could find her a good stepmother." Jake trailed off, shaking his head. But what woman in her right mind would want to marry into this struggle? During their lunch break, sitting in the shade of the barn and sharing the sandwiches Mary Beth had made, the conversation turned to Mary Beth's own situation. "Tell me about this man you're going to marry," Jake said. "Thomas something." "Thomas Whitmore," Mary Beth replied. "He has a ranch near Cedar Falls. We've been corresponding for several months." Jake's expression changed and Mary Beth noticed him exchange a quick glance with Lucy. "What is it?" Mary Beth asked. Jake seemed to struggle with something, then set down his sandwich. "Miss Ashford, I don't want to speak ill of a man I've never met, but I've heard the name Thomas Whitmore before." Mary Beth felt a chill run down her spine. "What have you heard?" "My neighbor Bill Henderson mentioned him once. Said Whitmore went through mail-order brides like other men go through horses. 3 or 4 women in the past 2 years. What happened to them?" Mary Beth asked quietly. "They left," Jake said simply. "All of them. Usually within a few months. Bill said the last one, a girl named Rachel, came through here on her way back east. She was in bad shape. Thin. Scared. Wouldn't talk about what happened. Mary Beth felt the sandwich turn to dust in her mouth. Maybe they just weren't suited to ranch life. Maybe, Jake agreed, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. Bill's wife tried to help Rachel, get her to stay and rest for a few days. But the girl was desperate to get as far away as possible. Wouldn't even stay the night. Did she say anything about why she left? Jake looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Henderson said Rachel had bruises on her arms, old ones and new ones, and she was terrified of any man who came near her. Lucy had been listening with wide eyes.
"Is the mean man going to hurt Miss Mary Beth too?"
she asked in a small voice. "We don't know that he's mean, sweetheart," Jake said gently. Maybe the other ladies just weren't happy with ranch life. But Mary Beth could see in his eyes that he didn't believe his own words. She thought about Thomas's letters, how controlling they had sometimes seemed. He had given her very specific instructions about what to bring, what to wear, how to behave. At the time, she had thought he was just being helpful. Now she wondered if there had been warning signs she had missed. "What should I do?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Jake said honestly. "Maybe talk to him when you meet him. See how he treats you. Trust your instincts." "And if my instincts tell me to run?" Jake met her eyes steadily. "Then run. No marriage is worth your safety or happiness." They worked in thoughtful silence for the rest of the afternoon. Mary Beth's mind churned with questions and fears. She had been so focused on escaping her lonely life in Boston that she hadn't really considered what kind of life she might be entering. Thomas's letters had painted a picture of comfort and security. But what if the reality was very different? As the sun began to set, they finished repairing the last section of fence. Mary Beth was dirty and tired, her hands rough from the work, but she felt oddly satisfied. There was something fulfilling about physical labor that created something useful and lasting. "Thank you," Jake said as they gathered up the tools. "I couldn't have done this nearly as quickly without your help." "I enjoyed it," Mary Beth said, surprising herself with the truth. It felt good to build something. Lucy skipped ahead of them toward the house. "Can Miss Mary Beth help us tomorrow too, Papa? We could fix the roof on the chicken coop." Jake smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. "Miss Ashford might have other things she wants to do, Lucy." But Mary Beth found herself saying, "Actually, I'd like that, if you don't mind the help." As they walked back to the house in the golden evening light, Mary Beth realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about tomorrow with dread or anxiety. Despite Jake's troubling news about Thomas, despite her uncertain future, she felt oddly at peace. Maybe it was the physical satisfaction of a day's hard work. Maybe it was Lucy's easy affection and Jake's quiet acceptance of her help. Or maybe it was simply the feeling of being part of something larger than herself, of belonging to a place where she was needed and valued. Whatever it was, Mary Beth knew that her 2 days at the Morrison Ranch were changing something fundamental inside her. She just wasn't sure yet what she was going to do about it. That night, as she helped Lucy get ready for bed and listened to the child's prayers, Mary Beth found herself wondering if this was what family felt like. And for the first time since leaving Boston, she began to question whether she really wanted to continue her journey to Cedar Falls after all. Part 6. A Choice at the Crossroads. Mary Beth woke before dawn on her last day at the Morrison Ranch. Tomorrow morning, she would catch the train to Cedar Falls and meet Thomas Whitmore. The thought sat heavy in her stomach like a cold stone. She dressed quietly and slipped into the kitchen, where she found Jake already up, staring into a cup of coffee as if it held the answers to all of life's problems. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. Jake looked up, startled. "I didn't hear you get up." "I'm sorry if I woke you." "You didn't. I've been thinking too much to sleep well." Mary Beth poured herself coffee and sat across from him at the small table. "Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "All right. The things you told me about Thomas Whitmore yesterday, how sure are you that they're true?" Jake studied her face in the dim morning light. "Sure enough that I'd be worried if my sister was going to marry him. Bill Henderson is a good man, not one to spread gossip or exaggerate. If he says those women left looking scared and hurt, then that's what happened." Mary Beth nodded, having expected this answer. "What would you do if you were in my situation?" "I can't make that choice for you," Jake said gently. "But I can tell you this, you're a strong, capable woman with a good heart. You could make a life for yourself anywhere. You don't have to settle for a marriage that might not be safe just because you're afraid of being alone." "But what else would I do?" I can't go back to Boston. I quit my job at the factory and sold everything I owned to pay for the train ticket. I have $3 to my name and no place to go. Jake was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. When he spoke, his voice was careful and measured. There might be another option, he said slowly. If you were interested. Mary Beth's heart began to beat faster, though she tried to keep her expression calm. What kind of option? You've seen what our life is like here. It's not easy. We don't have much money, the work is hard, and the winters are harsh. But Lucy adores you. And you've been happier these past 2 days than you seemed when you first got off that train. Jake, what are you trying to say? He took a deep breath. I'm trying to say that maybe you getting off at the wrong stop wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was meant to happen. He looked directly at her. Mary Beth, would you consider staying here? As my wife? Mary Beth felt the world shift around her. She had known this moment was coming, had felt it building in every shared glance, every moment of easy cooperation, every time she had tucked Lucy into bed. But hearing the words spoken aloud still took her breath away. I know it's not romantic, Jake continued, speaking faster now, as if he needed to get all the words out before he lost his courage. I'm not offering you love or passion or any of the things a young woman dreams about. But I'm offering you respect and partnership in a place where you're needed. Lucy needs a mother. And I need a partner to help build this ranch into something better. We work well together. We could make a good team. And you? Mary Beth asked quietly. What would you get out of this arrangement? Jake's cheeks reddened slightly. I'd get help with Lucy and the ranch. I'd get someone to share the load with, and he paused, seeming to search for the right words. I'd get the chance to try to make you happy, to give you the kind of life you deserve. Before Mary Beth could respond, they heard small footsteps on the stairs. Lucy appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her eyes and yawning. Why is everyone awake so early? She asked sleepily. We couldn't sleep, sweetheart, Jake said, lifting Lucy onto his lap. Are you hungry? I could make some breakfast. Can Miss Mary Beth make breakfast instead? Lucy asked hopefully. Her eggs taste better than yours, Papa. Jake laughed. Well, that's certainly true. As Mary Beth started breakfast, she was acutely aware of Jake watching her every move. The kitchen felt charged with unspoken possibilities. Lucy chattered about her plans for the day, unaware of the momentous conversation that had just taken place. Miss Mary Beth, will you help me practice my letters today? Lucy asked. Papa taught me some, but he says you probably know more about reading and writing since you lived in the city. Of course I will, Mary Beth said, though her mind was spinning. We can work on your letters after breakfast. As they ate, Mary Beth found herself studying this little family that had somehow become so important to her in just 3 short days. Jake ate with quiet efficiency, occasionally helping Lucy cut her bacon or reminding her to use her napkin. Lucy swung her legs under the table and talked constantly, her face bright with the joy of having someone to listen to her. This could be her life, Mary Beth realized. Every morning could start like this, with coffee shared in comfortable companionship, and a little girl who called her Mama. Every day could be filled with useful work, with the satisfaction of building something together, with the deep contentment of being where she belonged. But was she ready to give up all her original plans for a man she had known for 3 days? Was she being practical or just running away from a difficult situation? After breakfast, Mary Beth worked with Lucy on her letters while Jake went out to tend to the animals. The little girl was bright and eager to learn, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Miss Mary Beth, Lucy said as she carefully traced the letter M on her slate. Are you going to marry Papa? Mary Beth's hand froze in the middle of guiding Lucy's pencil. What makes you ask that? I heard you talking this morning, and Papa looks at you the way Mr. Henderson looks at Mrs. Henderson when he thinks she's not watching. Like you make him happy just by being there. Mary Beth was amazed by the child's perceptiveness. Would that make you happy? If I married your Papa? Lucy's face lit up like sunshine breaking through clouds. Oh yes, then you could be my real mama and stay here forever. We could fix up the house and make it pretty. And you could teach me how to sew and cook and read books, and Papa wouldn't be sad and worried all the time. Your Papa isn't always sad and worried, Mary Beth said gently. He is, though. He tries to hide it from me, but I can tell. He thinks I don't notice when he sits up at night staring at the bills, or when he goes to bed without eating because there's not enough food for both of us. But if you stayed, maybe he wouldn't have to worry so much because you could help him. Mary Beth's heart ached at the wisdom in Lucy's young voice. This child had seen too much, understood too much about the harsh realities of their life. She deserved security and happiness, deserved to grow up in a home filled with love instead of constant worry. "Lucy," Mary Beth said carefully, "what if I told you I was thinking about staying? But I wanted to make sure it's what you really wanted, not just for now but for always. Being someone's mama is a big responsibility. It means I would be here when you're happy and when you're sad, when you're good and when you misbehave. It means I would love you and take care of you for the rest of your life." Lucy dropped her pencil and threw her arms around Mary Beth's neck. "I want that more than anything in the whole world," she whispered fiercely. "Please don't go on that train tomorrow. Please stay and be my mama." Mary Beth held the little girl close, feeling tears prick her eyes. In 3 days, this child had wrapped herself around Mary Beth's heart so completely that the thought of leaving her felt like tearing away a piece of her soul. When Jake came back for lunch, he found Mary Beth and Lucy working together in the garden behind the house. Lucy was chattering excitedly about the vegetables they were planning to plant, and Mary Beth was taking notes on a piece of paper. "What's all this?" he asked, smiling at their obvious enthusiasm. "Miss Mary Beth knows all about gardens," Lucy announced. "She says we could grow enough vegetables to last all winter if we plant it right, and maybe even have some left over to sell in town." Jake looked at the detailed garden plan Mary Beth had sketched out. "This is impressive," he said. "Where did you learn so much about gardening?" "My aunt had a small garden behind her boarding house in Boston," Mary Beth explained. "I helped her with it every summer when I was young. I always loved that part of visiting her." "Look, Papa," Lucy said, pointing to the paper. "We could have carrots and potatoes and beans and corn. And Mary Beth says we could build a root cellar to store everything for winter." Jake met Mary Beth's eyes over Lucy's head. "Sounds like you two have big plans." "Only if," Mary Beth began, then stopped. She looked at Lucy, who was watching her with hopeful eyes, then back at Jake. "Only if I decide to stay." "And have you?" "Decided, I mean." Mary Beth took a deep breath. Standing there in the afternoon sunshine, with Lucy's small hand in hers and Jake's steady gaze on her face, she realized that her heart had already made the choice. Her practical mind was still catching up, but her heart knew where it wanted to be. "Yes," she said simply. "If you'll have me, I'd like to stay. I'd like to marry you, Jake Morrison, and be Lucy's mother." Lucy let out a whoop of joy and danced around the garden, her braids flying. Jake stepped closer to Mary Beth, his face serious but his eyes warm. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "This isn't the life you planned. It won't be easy." "I'm sure," Mary Beth said, and meant it completely. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Jake reached out and took her hands in his work-roughened ones. "Then I promise you this. I'll do everything in my power to make you happy, to make this a real home for all of us." Part 7 on the decision Mary. Beth woke on Thursday morning with her stomach in knots. Today was the day she was supposed to continue her journey to Cedar Falls to meet Thomas Whitmore. Instead, she would be staying at the Morrison Ranch to build a new life with Jake and Lucy. But first, there was something she had to do. "I need to go to Cedar Falls," she announced at breakfast, causing Jake to nearly choke on his coffee. "What?" he said when he could speak again. "I thought you decided to stay." "I did decide to stay," Mary Beth said firmly. "But I owe it to Thomas to tell him in person that I won't be marrying him. It's not right to simply not show up. He's expecting me and he deserves an explanation." Jake's face darkened with worry. "Mary Beth, what if he won't accept your decision? What if he tries to force you to honor your agreement?"
Then I'll deal with that when it happens.
"But I have to try to do this the right way." Mary Beth reached across the table and took Jake's hand. "I'm coming back, Jake. This is my home now. But I need to close the door on my old plans properly." Lucy, who had been listening with wide eyes, suddenly looked frightened. "But what if the mean man doesn't let you come back? What if he keeps you there?" "He can't keep me anywhere I don't want to be," Mary Beth said with more confidence than she felt. "I'll take the morning train to Cedar Falls, meet with Thomas, and be back on the evening train. You'll barely have time to miss me." "I'll miss you the minute you leave," Lucy said sadly. Jake squeezed Mary Beth's hand. "I don't like this idea, but I understand why you feel you need to do it. Just be careful. Trust your instincts, and if anything feels wrong, get out of there fast." "I will," Mary Beth promised. "And Jake, thank you for understanding. The ride to Cedar Creek Station felt different this time. Jake drove the wagon with Lucy squeezed between them on the narrow seat. Instead of feeling like she was heading toward an uncertain future, Mary Beth felt like she was going to settle the past so she could fully embrace her new life. "You'll really come back today?" Lucy asked for the 10th time. "I promise," Mary Beth said, hugging the little girl close. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." At the station, Jake helped Mary Beth down from the wagon. The same old man was sitting on the bench whittling another piece of wood. "Back again, miss?" he asked with interest. "Just for the day," Mary Beth replied. "I have some business to attend to in Cedar Falls." The train arrived with its familiar whistle and cloud of steam. Mary Beth kissed Lucy goodbye and gave Jake a quick, shy kiss on the cheek that made him blush. "I'll be back by sunset," she promised. The train ride to Cedar Falls seemed to take forever, even though it was only a few hours. Mary Beth rehearsed what she would say to Thomas, trying to find words that would be honest but not unnecessarily hurtful. How do you tell a man you've never met that you won't marry him because you've fallen in love with someone else? Cedar Falls was much larger than Cedar Creek, with a proper main street lined with shops and businesses. The train station was busy with travelers and freight wagons. Mary Beth stepped off the train with her heart pounding, looking around for a tall man with dark hair who matched Thomas's description. She didn't have to look long. A man approached her almost immediately, his cold blue eyes taking in her appearance from head to toe like he was evaluating livestock. "You must be Mary Beth Ashford," he said without warmth. "You're 3 days late." "Yes, I'm Mary Beth, and you must be Thomas Whitmore. I apologize for the delay. There were some complications with my travel arrangements." "Indeed." Thomas's voice was clipped and disapproving. "Well, no matter. You're here now. My wagon is outside. We'll go to my ranch immediately so you can get settled and we can discuss the wedding arrangements. Actually, Mr. Whitmore, I need to speak with you about that." Mary Beth forced herself to meet his eyes steadily. "Perhaps we could find somewhere private to talk?" Thomas frowned. "What's to discuss? We have an agreement. You came west to be my wife, and I'm prepared to honor my part of the bargain. The preacher is expecting us on Sunday." "Please," Mary Beth said. "Just a few minutes of your time. There's a restaurant across the street. Could we perhaps have coffee and talk?" Something in her tone must have warned him that this wasn't a simple conversation about wedding details. His frown deepened, but he gestured toward the restaurant with obvious reluctance. The restaurant was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread in the air. Thomas chose a table in the back corner, away from the other customers. He waited until they had ordered coffee before speaking again. "Well, what's so important that it couldn't wait until we reached my ranch?" Mary Beth took a deep breath. "Mr. Whitmore, I want to thank you for your letters and for inviting me to come west. Your offer was very generous, and I know you're a successful rancher who could provide well for a wife. But," Thomas's voice was dangerously quiet, "but I've realized that we wouldn't be well suited for marriage. I've decided not to accept your proposal." The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas stared at her with those cold blue eyes, and Mary Beth could see anger building behind them like storm clouds. "You've decided," he repeated slowly. "Just like that. You've traveled halfway across the country, made me wait 3 extra days, and now you've decided we wouldn't be well suited?" "I know it's disappointing," Mary Beth began, but Thomas cut her off. "Disappointing?" His voice rose slightly, causing other diners to glance their way. "Do you have any idea what I've invested in this arrangement? The money I've spent, the preparations I've made? I've already announced to my neighbors that I would be bringing home a wife." "I'm truly sorry for any inconvenience," Mary Beth said, trying to keep her voice calm. "But surely you wouldn't want to marry someone who wasn't genuinely committed to the marriage." "You were committed enough when you wrote to me asking to be my wife," Thomas snapped. "What changed? Did you find out about my previous wives? Let me guess. Someone filled your head with stories about how I mistreated them." The way he said it made Mary Beth's blood run cold. He wasn't denying the stories, he was angry that she had heard them. "Those women were weak," Thomas continued, his voice low and venomous. "They couldn't handle the responsibilities of being a rancher's wife. They were spoiled city girls who expected to be pampered and coddled. I thought you might be different, but I see you're just as weak as the others." Mary Beth felt fear creeping up her spine, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Mr. Whitmore, I understand you're angry, but my decision is final. I won't be marrying you." "Oh, but I think you will," Thomas said softly. You see, Miss Ashford, you entered into a contract with me. I paid for your train ticket. I made arrangements for our wedding. I prepared a place for you in my home. You can't just decide to back out because you've gotten cold feet. I can and I am, Mary Beth said firmly. I'll reimburse you for the train ticket when I'm able. Thomas leaned forward across the table, his eyes glittering with malice. With what money? You told me in your letters that you had nothing, that you were desperate to escape your situation in Boston. Do you think you can just come west and shop around for the best offer? Do you think men like me are fools to be toyed with? I think this conversation is over, Mary Beth said, starting to rise from her chair. Thomas's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, his fingers digging into her skin painfully. Sit down, he hissed. We're not finished talking. Mary Beth looked around the restaurant desperately, but the other diners were absorbed in their own conversations and didn't seem to notice her distress. Thomas's grip on her wrist was strong, and she could feel his nails cutting into her skin. You're hurting me, she said quietly. Good, Thomas replied. Maybe that will help you understand how serious I am. You will marry me on Sunday, or you'll find yourself in a very difficult situation. You have no money, no place to go, no way to get back east. You need me, Miss Ashford, whether you want to admit it or not. Let go of my wrist, Mary Beth said, louder this time. I'll let go when you agree to honor your commitment. Is there a problem here? A new voice asked. Mary Beth looked up to see a large man in a sheriff's badge standing beside their table. His weathered face was stern, and his hand rested casually on his gun belt. Thomas immediately released Mary Beth's wrist and sat back in his chair, his expression shifting to one of false concern. No problem at all, Sheriff, he said smoothly. Just a small disagreement between my fiancé and me about wedding plans. You know how emotional women can get. The sheriff's eyes flicked to Mary Beth's wrist, which already showed red marks from Thomas's grip. Miss, is this man bothering you? Mary Beth felt a moment of uncertainty. Thomas was well known in this town, probably respected and influential. Would the sheriff believe her word over his? But then she remembered Jake's steady strength, Lucy's trusting smile, and the life waiting for her back at the Morrison Ranch. Yes, he is bothering me, she said clearly. I told Mr. Whitmore that I wouldn't be marrying him, and he grabbed my wrist and threatened me when I tried to leave. The sheriff's expression hardened. Mr. Whitmore, I think you'd better come with me. We need to have a talk about how to treat ladies in my town. This is ridiculous, Thomas protested, but his voice had lost its threatening edge. Part 8. Coming home 6 months had passed since Mary Beth stepped off the train at Cedar Creek Station by mistake, and the Morrison Ranch looked like a completely different place. What had once been a struggling homestead barely managing to survive was now a thriving small ranch with fresh paint on the buildings, new fencing, and a garden that was the envy of everyone in the county. Mary Beth stood on the front porch, watching Jake and Lucy work together to repair the gate to the horse corral. The morning sun caught the highlights in Lucy's clean, neatly braided hair, and she chattered constantly as she handed tools to her father. The child had grown in the past months, not just physically but in confidence and happiness. Her dresses now fit properly. Her cheeks were round and rosy from good food, and she had the carefree laugh of a child who felt completely secure and loved. Mama, Lucy called, using the name that had become natural over the months. Come see what Papa and I fixed. Mary Beth smiled and walked over to admire their work. The gate hung straight and true, a marked improvement over the sagging, barely functional barrier that had been there when she first arrived. It looks perfect, she said, and Jake beamed with pride. The months of good food and shared responsibility had been good to him too. He stood straighter now, no longer carrying the weight of impossible burdens alone. The lines of worry around his eyes had softened, replaced by laugh lines from the many evenings they spent together as a family. Lucy did most of the work, Jake said, ruffling his daughter's hair. She's getting to be quite the ranch hand. I want to learn everything, Lucy announced. Mama says education is important for girls too, not just boys. So I'm learning ranch work and book learning and cooking and sewing. I'm going to be the smartest ranch wife in all of Montana Territory someday. Mary Beth and Jake exchanged an amused glance. Lucy had big plans for her future, and both her parents were determined to help her achieve whatever dreams she might have. Speaking of education, Mary Beth said, don't forget that Mrs. Patterson is coming this afternoon for your lesson. 3 days a week, Mary Beth taught Lucy reading, writing, and arithmetic. But on Tuesdays and Fridays, Mrs. Patterson from town came to give Lucy more advanced lessons in literature and history. It was an expense they could barely afford, but Jake had insisted that his daughter would have every educational opportunity possible. And tomorrow is market day, Lucy added excitedly. Are you going to enter your preserves in the competition again, Mama? Mary Beth laughed. I suppose I could. Mrs. Henderson seemed pretty confident that her strawberry jam would win this year, though. Your peach preserves are better, Lucy said loyally. Everyone says so. It was true that Mary Beth's preserves had become quite popular in Cedar Creek and the surrounding area. What had started as a way to use excess fruit from their expanding garden had turned into a small but steady source of extra income. Combined with Jake's improved cattle operation and the vegetables they sold in town, the family was actually prospering. The sound of approaching horses made them all look up. A familiar wagon was coming down the dusty road toward their ranch. Mary Beth recognized the driver and felt her stomach tighten with old anxiety. It's the sheriff from Cedar Falls, Jake said quietly, his hand moving instinctively to rest on Mary Beth's shoulder. They watched as Sheriff Morrison, no relation to Jake, despite the shared name, drove up to the house and climbed down from his wagon. He was a big man with graying hair and a kind face that looked troubled today. Morning, folks, he said, touching his hat brim politely. Mrs. Morrison, I hope you're well. I'm very well, thank you, Sheriff. What brings you all the way to Cedar Creek? I'm afraid it's business concerning Thomas Whitmore, the sheriff said, his expression grave. I thought you had a right to know what's happened. Mary Beth felt Jake's hand tighten protectively on her shoulder. What about him? He's dead, ma'am. Died 3 days ago. The news hit Mary Beth like a physical blow. Even though Thomas had frightened and threatened her, she had never wished him harm. What happened? He was found in his barn by one of his hired men. Looks like his horse threw him and he hit his head on a post. Probably died instantly. Lucy, who had been listening with wide eyes, moved closer to Mary Beth. The child still remembered the fear and tension surrounding that day when Mary Beth had gone to Cedar Falls, even though they had tried to shield her from the worst details. I'm sorry to hear that, Mary Beth said carefully. It's a terrible way to die. Yes, ma'am, it is. But that's not the only reason I came. The sheriff reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Thomas left some papers and your name was mentioned in them. Seems he never got around to canceling certain arrangements he'd made. Mary Beth took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a bank draft made out to her for $50, far more money than she had ever seen at one time. I don't understand, she said. Apparently, Whitmore had paid various fees related to your marriage. License, preacher, even had some furniture delivered for his house that he'd bought thinking you'd want it. His will specified that if anything happened to him before the wedding, these expenses should be returned to you since the arrangements would be canceled. Mary Beth stared at the bank draft in amazement. $50 would pay for a lot of improvements to their ranch or Lucy's education, or simply provide security against future hardships. There's something else, the sheriff continued. When we were going through his belongings, we found letters. Lots of letters from women back east, all responding to advertisements he'd placed for wives. Seems you weren't the only one who had second thoughts about marrying him. He pulled out a small bundle of letters tied with string. These were all from women who wrote to say they'd changed their minds and wouldn't be coming west after all. Looks like word had gotten around back east about his reputation. Mary Beth felt a wave of relief and vindication. She hadn't been wrong to fear Thomas, and she hadn't been the only woman who had sensed something dangerous about him. Thank you for bringing this to me, Sheriff, she said, and for letting me know what happened. Just doing my job, ma'am. You folks have a good day now. After the sheriff left, the three of them stood together in their yard, processing what they had learned. Are you all right? Jake asked Mary Beth gently. I think so, she said honestly. It's strange, isn't it? If I hadn't gotten off at the wrong train stop, I might have married him. I might have been living at his ranch when this accident happened. Don't think about what might have been, Jake advised, pulling both Mary Beth and Lucy into a warm embrace. Think about what is. We're here, we're together, and we're happy. And we're rich, Lucy added, grinning at the bank draft in Mary Beth's hand. $50 is more money than I've ever seen. Mary Beth laughed, the tension of the sheriff's visit finally breaking. We're not exactly rich, sweetheart, but this will help us with a lot of things we've been wanting to do. They spent the rest of the morning discussing how to use the unexpected windfall. Jake wanted to buy lumber to build a proper bedroom for Lucy. Mary Beth thought they should invest in more chickens and maybe a milk cow. Lucy predictably wanted to spend it all on books. In the end, they decided to do a little of everything. They would make improvements to the ranch, expand their small business ventures, and yes, buy plenty of books for Lucy's education. That afternoon, as Mrs. Patterson worked with Lucy on her lessons and Jake tended to the cattle, Mary Beth found herself back on the front porch looking out over their land. The garden was thriving, full of vegetables that would feed them through the winter and provide extras to sell. The chicken coop was full of healthy hens that laid more eggs than they could eat. The small herd of cattle was growing steadily, but more than the material improvements, it was the feeling of the place that had changed so dramatically. Where once there had been desperation and barely controlled struggle, now there was hope and contentment. The little house rang with laughter instead of worry. Lucy went to bed each night with stories and kisses instead of falling asleep alone by the stove. Jake no longer carried the world on his shoulders alone, and Mary Beth had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. She had found home. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie sky in shades of gold and pink, Jake came up behind her and slipped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "Just all of it. How different everything is now compared to 6 months ago." "Different how?" Mary Beth leaned back against his solid warmth. 6 months ago, I was sitting on a train, terrified about meeting a stranger I was supposed to marry. I thought my life was ending because I was leaving everything I knew. Now I realize it was just beginning. "Are you happy?" Jake asked. "Really happy? Sometimes I worry that this life is too hard, too isolated. You gave up so much to be here." Mary Beth turned in his arms to face him. "I gave up nothing that mattered. I traded loneliness for love, desperation for security, emptiness for purpose. How could I not be happy?" From inside the house came the sound of Lucy's laughter as Mrs. Patterson told her a funny story from one of her books. It was a sound that never failed to make Mary Beth smile. "Besides," she added, "look what I gained. A husband who respects me, a daughter who loves me,